And that thing that's on the screen, you just click on it and make it go away. I did ask last week for those who were in attendance to send me some questions that you might want to ask. I only got an opportunity to ask one person if it was okay for me to reveal who asked the questions. So these are going to be anonymous as it presently stands. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go back and forth. We're going to have one of the questions that was sent to me, and then we'll see if we can have some questions in the room. Today, since I'm jostling a few things and juggling a few things, I'm going to ask you to find the little thing down on the bottom where you can have reactions and raise your hand. Although I usually see this when you do it, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to notice when you put the raised hand up. So before we get underway, any questions or anything at all that we might want to address before we get started with the first question? Okay. I believe that I'm sharing a screen that has a question on it. If you recognize this and you'd like to reveal yourself as the one who asked this question, I'll give you a minute to go ahead and jump in. Awesome. Go ahead, Diane.
Yes, I think those were my questions.
I think they are.
And Reverend Paul John Roach, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I guess I don't have to read everything, but Unity Principle 2 is, to me, you said in your book, the presence of spirit is within each human being. As I am in my center and as I go to other centers and hear people talk, I don't think everybody feels that spirit within them. There's a whole lot of the God out there and, ask for this and sort of like traditional Christians do. So my question is, do you see people really understanding that the spirit is within them?
It's a great question, isn't it? And I think the first answer would be probably not, because it's a hard thing to grasp the actual idea of the spirit within you. It's easier to have some kind of traditional understanding of God out there, the transcendent God. However, having said that, that's one of the things that makes Unity different from traditional Christian viewpoints, right? The emphasis in traditional Christianity is on this God outside of ourselves, whereas we dare to claim that same magnificence, that same presence is deep within us. In the last few years, especially at Unity World Headquarters, there's been a real shift to focus on that God within, and Linda Martello Whitsitt, for example, who is the head now of the Unity, what used to be called Silent Unity, now we just call it Unity Prayer Ministry. She wrote a book called How to Pray to God, How to Pray Without, what's it called exactly? I'm stumbling on it. How to pray without talking to God. That's it. And because she wanted to emphasize this idea of the Christ within, that you don't have to go to an external entity out there, that it is within us. Now, there's a downside to the idea of the God within, because some of us in Unity think we've got God in our pocket, right? Oh yeah, God's within me, and we become a little bit arrogant about it. The good thing about the transcendent God, the God out there, is it helps us be filled with wonder and awe, that because God is beyond and above anything we can conceive of, it's totally magnificent and awe-inspiring. And if we feel we have it in our pockets, then we become a little bit, we sort of aggrandize our ego sometimes. So it may not be the Christ within that we're focusing on. It might be the spiritualized ego that we're focusing on. So you have to be really careful with that. I see it as, both. I like the God without, the transcendent God, the magnificence of the universe, which, humbles me. But I also like to claim that, that the essence of that is also within me, because that's what really brings transformation. And unless you have a feeling, a felt sense, a personal direct experience of the divinity within you, however you want to call that, whatever name you give to it, unless you have had that mystical moment, if you like, that connection, there's no real change, right? That's when change happens. So Unity has always emphasized that. Charles Fillmore Myrtle, they emphasize that indwelling presence of the Christ within everybody. So Unity as a movement is an ongoing work in progress. You may notice this, right? We're not there yet. And so we're still investigating what it means to be spiritual beings having a human experience. And some churches do it in one way, some churches do it in another way. But the thing is, it's an ongoing experiment, and that's exciting because we are always open-minded and open-hearted. That's the key. We don't have it all worked out for us, right? So I think a religion or a spiritual movement dies when we have it all worked out. So let's keep open-minded about it and have this, as Reverend Downer said earlier, this multiplicity of ideas. Keeps us buoyant and open. So, yeah, I think the emphasis needs to be both transcendent and immanent, but knowing that true transformation comes from knowing it within yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that answer.
Sure.
Here is another question that's further down there, but as I mentioned from the very start, I kind of wanted to bounce back and forth between the questions that have been sent to me and the questions from the floor. Maddie, you have a question. Thank you for raising your hand.
I do. I never heard the term spiritualized ego before. Could you go into that a little bit? What exactly is spiritualized ego?
Well, it's that part of us that loves the ideas around spirituality. It resonate with some of the teachings, maybe that Unity teaches or other spiritual traditions, and we follow it. But we're not really letting go of our humanness in the process. We want both. We want the spirit, and we want our egos, our humanness. And sometimes when we think we've become very spiritual, we may not be as spiritual as we think we are. We've simply got a highly evolved ego, if you like, and and the danger with that is that we can fool ourselves, and it can lead to a certain arrogance. I've seen a few people in Unity over my life that they talk a good talk, and but they think I've got it now, and one day you will too. Have you ever come across that? Anybody talking
yeah.
I
would call that
when you're as evolved as I am, you'll see what I'm talking about. But you're not quite there yet. Well, when you compare like that, I think that the spiritualized ego is in charge, not spirit.
I would call that spiritual pride. That's what I would have called. But I guess it's similar to what you're saying.
That's, I think, more traditional Christianity would call it spiritual pride, exactly.
Thank you.
And it leads to hubris, right? It's the pride before the fall, or whatever.
It's interesting to note that that getting rid of the spiritualized ego can be a painful process, and that's also the importance of crucifixion, of crossing out that which I'm not and lifting myself.
Absolutely.
The truth of me. So let's go back to Diane's question. And Diane, I'm going to go ahead and let you read that or ask that in whatever way you'd like to see fit.
Okay, thank you. So do you see a hopeful future for mankind? As we look around the world, we don't see oneness. And even with our political disagreements in the United States and our maybe religious disagreements, I don't see a whole lot of oneness. And I just wonder, in your educated guess, do you see a hopeful future for mankind? Do you feel that we'll ever have peace on earth and the feeling of oneness? Thank you.
Well, I'm a Unity minister, so therefore I have to be optimistic, right? I have to see the highest and best and know that everything is unfolding in divine order. that's part of my job, rather than hold up a sign saying, well, we're all going to hell and it's all going to, the end is nigh and all that. So I sort of a bias towards optimism in that regard. But you're right, when you look around and you listen to the news every day and you see all the atrocities. We had that brutal stabbing of the great novelist Salman Rushdie yesterday. The endless wars we see. And we see it more clearly now, more relentlessly because of the modern media, right? So it makes you feel like the world is going to hell, in a handbasket. And yes, in a sense, that's true. But then in another sense, you look around at the beauty and the peace and the fact that billions of people are living good lives relatively throughout the planet. The progress is being made. They tell us, I don't know if it's true, but there's less wars now on the planet than there have been in any other time in human history. Doesn't seem like that sometimes, but that's what statistically they tell us. Things maybe are improving. In terms of peace on earth, I don't think we're ever going to see, quote, the external peace on earth, because, that is a part of the experiment of human beings. It is struggle and reaching towards the light. And so there's always going to be that kind of struggle going on. But of course, peace on earth in the deepest sense of the word is an internal thing. And when you find that peace in your own heart, then, you begin to emanate that peace into the world. And so you become a beacon of light and peace. So that's our job, I think, is not to try and create peace on earth, which may be a difficult proposition, but peace in our hearts. And then the whole view that we have of the world changes. And like I said, we become more effective. I love the image that the great saint Ramana Maharshi said, we're walking over this rough ground, this earth, and we're trying to cover it with leather so that it'll be a peaceful and lovely experience for us. And he said, that's a hard task to do, to cover the whole earth with leather. And that's a bit like trying to find peace on earth. He said, rather than that, just cut out a piece of leather and put it on your feet, on both feet, and make a shoe. And then you can walk over the rough earth with ease. And I think the symbolism there is, find peace for yourself, right? And then you move over the earth in a more peaceful way. To try and find it out there first, almost impossible. That's my viewpoint anyway.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions,
Right.
Diane. I really appreciate you sending those in. Sandra and James, you have your hand raised.
Great question.
Would you unmute and then share with us?
Yes, so pretty much, John Paul, you kind of answered what I was going to say. For me, when I consider peace on earth and see all that's transpiring around me,
Right.
I just try to go within myself and find that peace so that I don't get frazzled or anxious or whatever. And I think the song that we sing about let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me comes to my mind often in many situations. And I think that for myself, and I'm not sure if this is really part of our unity movement, but it's about standing in that sacred space when we see other things transpiring. And just our perception that, okay, this is what my ego sees, this is what my mind sees. However, I know that we all have that opportunity to choose peace, and I'm going to choose it for myself. And that's kind of how I make the choice of not watching the news all the time or whatever, because that's a story that I don't want to amplify, if you will.
Yes.
So am I just hiding then from the truth, or is that?
That's a good question. I think it's a balance, because people who are interested in social action and whatnot say that, you don't want to be in denial about these horrific things that are happening. And if you're you know, in this platitude stuff or Pollyanna unity stuff, you know, where we're declaring peace is established and all that. It seems a little silly, you know. But we're not saying that. We're saying, you know, you have charge not over the whole world, but you have charge over your own consciousness. And when you remain centered and peaceful, then you're able to make a bigger change in your world. You know, I was reading this week actually about a quote from Kobun Chino, who was a great Zen master who lived in San Francisco area in the latter part of the 20th century. And after 9/11, somebody came to him who was very, very distraught and said, how can I deal with this horror? I can't get my mind to find any kind of peace. And Kobun Chino very compassionately looked at her and said, I understand. And then he said, do something kind for someone each day. And I thought that was a great answer, right? Because no, I can't change all that horror, but I can do something productive in the face of all that horror, and that is to be kind. And I love that, you know, find ways to be helpful to another human being, because that's a way to get over spiritual pride or spiritualized ego too. Spiritualized ego thinks about itself too much, whereas the truth is, you know, when you can be kind to another person, then you've broken down that barrier between you and them. You're connecting, and unity is about connecting. You know, that's why we call ourselves unity, right? So I think this is crucially important.
Thank you. That's a beautiful exploration. So we have another question here, and the person who composed this actually is the one person who I got in touch with, asked if it was okay if we revealed who that is. Jenny, would you like to address this question, or shall I read it for you? Which would you prefer? You want me to do that? Okay. So this begins with a quote from Thomas Aquinas, or as my friend in New Mexico always said, San Tomas Aquinas. So he who is not angry when there is just cause for anger is immoral. Why? Because anger looks to the good of justice. And if you can live amid injustice without anger, you are immoral as well as unjust. Now that's an interesting thing to think about. So when I read this quote, it resonated with me, but I follow a unity belief structure that has led to believe that I can't get political. That very premise serves to emotionally rip me apart because it refutes an elemental part of my being. If I sit back smiling all the way while my world is in turmoil, if I utter nothing but platitudes when children are gunned down in schools and peaceful worshipers are bloodied in their churches, if I allow racism, sexism, ageism, homophobia, pedophilia, sex trafficking, and all kinds of hatred to be voiced in my presence, and I do not speak out against it, if lies on the news exist unchecked for entertainment and ratings purposes, if public education continues to get dumbed down and exploratory thought is eradicated from library shelves, if abject and pernicious stupidity is not addressed by the faithful, if our activism is to meditate and pray, then I fear greatly for us all. Where is the place for social activism in unity?
Wow.
Wow, that's a heck of a statement, isn't it? All the list of the traumatic things that are going on in our society, and they're all real, they're all true, you know, from a relative level anyway. They may not be true from the absolute level, but they're manifesting in our world. And yes, we have to pay attention to that. The Thomas Aquinas quote is interesting. I probably wouldn't have used the word anger, because that to me is something we need to transcend. But on the other hand, we all have anger and we can't deny it. But if you leave your social activism in anger, you know, and begin it in anger and keep being angry, then you're not going to be effective, right? It was the unity minister, I'm not recalling his name. Oh yeah, Rankin, Reverend Rankin in Unity of Houston told me once that anger is just a raw material. It's a natural emotion. We don't have to leave it at the level it expresses. You can bring it up. You can use the energy that's within it to almost like Kundalini, bring it up into a higher level of expression. And I think that's what we're called to do here with all these things is, yeah, I take my righteous anger and indignation, but I don't leave it there in frustration. It'll only turn on me and destroy me ultimately. I'll be a very bitter person if I do that. But if I can bring it up into a greater sense of light, then I can be effective, because I cannot be effective if I'm lost in pain and difficulty. I can only be effective if I stay centered in the midst of these things. So not to deny them, but to be effective in dealing with them. I think that who said it? Pray and move your feet, right? You can't just pray. You have to then, from that prayerful consciousness, decide how you choose to live. Like we said, be kind to someone each day. That's a form of action, isn't it? And so that this is my response to all those things that go on. There may be many things I can't impact, but I can impact one thing, and that is how I treat myself, how I center myself, and then how I act, how I go forth. Because if I'm going forth with angst, I'm only being part of the problem. But if I'm going forth with a desire for change, a desire for transformation, and a centered way of doing that, then I think we can be effective. So then let's talk about unity as social action, because for many years we've shied away from it, and because we didn't want to upset people, because we want everybody to like us. But in recent years, there has been a move, and we talked about it a lot at Unity World Headquarters, of making statements when things happen, from the unity point of view. In fact, we'd like to get to the stage where unity is called upon for a response, as they call upon certain, Catholic ministers or other ministers for response in difficult times. We'd like to be like that. And I think that's a good move forward, that we take a stance on social issues, not necessarily political issues. We don't want to get embroiled in that, but definitely social issues. And I think a statement was made recently by Unity World Headquarters, actually, in this regard, about the latest outrages in school killings and whatnot. And I'm encouraged to hear that, because I think we need to speak out and hold the high watch, offer the higher perspective here that we can provide in unity. And I'd like to see more of that personally. But I think it needs to come not from angst and anger, but from a sense of how can we empower ourselves, and how can we encourage other people to be empowered to do something about these various atrocities or whatever it is. Because sitting by and I call it whistling by the graveyard, sitting by and just kumbaya, doing a nice prayer, that doesn't really do it, right? We need a little more than that.
Sure.
Difficult subject, though. It's not an easy subject, and it ticks a lot of people off when you talk social action or politics, and you can alienate people. So I think a lot of unity ministers don't want to go there.
Sometimes it is difficult. Yes, beautifully crafted answer and a beautifully crafted question. Ed,
absolutely.
Thank you for raising your hand.
Did you see the statement that Unity Headquarters made on the Roe versus Wade decision a couple weeks back? Yeah. It took them a couple of days. I go to a couple of Unity churches here in Texas. I went to Unity of Wimberley, and the minister was a little perturbed that we didn't come out with something, quite quickly. But I think it took 4 or 5 days for Unity to put something together. I thought it was fantastic. It wasn't cited, but it was a good opinion.
I was part of the backstory on that. I won't go into details on it, but there are various Unity minister threads that we have, groups and whatever, that are private to the ministers, so we can chat and everything. And then there was a long discussion about doing something. And one of the Unity ministers, who's been very active in this regard over many years, Leona Evans. She won't mind me mentioning her name because she was part of this process and talked with UWN about it. And they used part of her statement that she'd used in her own church. And I was very encouraged that they decided to do that because for a while, nothing was going to happen, right? We weren't going to respond. But there was an upswell from people, and the leadership decided it was appropriate to say something. So I'm glad we did.
Good,
Things
thank
like
you.
that, I think we can make
Yeah,
a difference.
it
Because if
wasn't,
people don't know
it
where
wasn't
we stand,
opinionated. It was very, very well worded.
but then there's people in unity. Unfortunately, it's not everybody agrees with that statement. For instance, some people are pro-life or in our unity communities. And so, if we start saying, we are the other way, then you're alienating part of our community, and that we don't want to particularly be doing that. So again, it's a knife edge. It's a difficult one to do, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
So Sue, I'm gonna upset the apple cart just a little bit. Go ahead and ask your question, then we'll go back to Jenny's question. Next question.
Okay, thank you. No, we've been talking about taking action in our world, and it definitely looks as if action is needed, social action. Reverend Paul, John, could you say something about the power of prayer to create change in the world?
Absolutely. I mean, for 130 years, Unity has been praying and holding the high watch for people. It started way back in the beginning of the Unity movement, right in 1889, and the Silent Unity prayer ministry has been going non-stop for all that time, and still offers, help for millions of people every year in a variety of formats. You can call in, you can write in, you can go on social media. There's various ways that the Silent Unity reaches out, prayer services, booklets, the daily word, so many things. So we believe in the power of prayer. Prayer and consciousness, transformation of consciousness began the Unity movement. It led to healing for Myrtle and also for Charles. And so they know that the power of affirmative prayer, and they called it the most highly accelerated mind action known. And I love that. Most highly accelerated mind action known. If you want to really be transformative, then pray, right? And there's a million ways to pray. There's no right or wrong way to pray. It's simply focusing in on that understanding that you are a spiritual being, and that you're in the flow of all that's possible in the universe. And that is, eminently powerful when you do that. And it transforms lives. It transformed my life. But I don't think it stops there. Once we pray, once we're in that centered space, then we live, right? We're not just in the Himalayas the rest of our lives. There are some people that do that. They go up and they hold the space in monasteries, in caves, whatever. And if that's yours to do, great. That's very effective too. But for most of us, the vast majority of human beings, you have to come down from the mountain and live our lives. We're householders, whatever. And so therefore we take the understanding of prayer that we have every day and we put it into practice in our lives. So I think it's a dual
Thank you,
thing.
beautiful
Right?
answer. I appreciate it.
So that's my understanding. Remember what Gandhi supposedly said, if you had a hard day ahead and he felt he was going to be rushed with everything, he took 2 hours to pray instead of 1. So the opposite, if we've got a rushed, busy day, we usually say, well, I haven't got time to pray right now. But he doubled it up. He did more prayer time because then he could be effective with his busy day. And I think I love that, because if you get centered, take time, always take the time. And you can do it in a moment, right? I love the little arrow prayers where you just take a moment every so often to hold an affirmation, get centered, and then go back into your life. It doesn't have to be a formal thing, one particular time of the day. It's an everyday thing, every moment thing.
Amen to that. Amen to prayer. So we're going to go back to the question that was proposed by Jenny. And I love that she quotes Charles Fillmore in here. She said there was a sermon.
Yeah, I love that
Charles Fillmore. Yeah. Yes. He railed against the injustice of the Teapot Dome scandal. It's named Lesson in Justice. And that particular little piece of American graft had to do with the Secretary of the Interior, who took bribes from the petroleum industry to tap into Navy oil reserves in several states. So glad that nothing like that is going on today. There was no competitive bidding, and the cabinet member later went to jail. Fillmore was outraged by it and used it as a contemporary base for a sermon. I'm relieved to know that an activist dwelt within him as well, for surely Jesus was an activist and the Christ is. What are your views on social and political activism within Unity?
We sort of touched on it a little bit, didn't we, earlier? That I like the idea that we need to state things clearly, our viewpoint on this. And like you said, ironically there, you know, it's not happening today. Unfortunately, it is happening today, isn't it? In spades. The good news is, in that instant, it seemed that the person went to jail. I like that. And hopefully other people who do you know, criminal acts will also go to jail. That's all I'll say about that. You can draw your own conclusions. But yeah, Charles Fillmore didn't mind speaking his truth, but he always remained centered in the higher spiritual truth, and asked people to do that too. So, you know, I think, what was it that Jesus said? You know, in the world, there's always going to be tribulation, right? There's always going to be craziness. Ever since I was born, there's been craziness. I mean, I look back on the 60s and we had the fear of God put into us about we were all going to die in nuclear war back in the 60s. And then we had Vietnam, and then we had further atrocities. And then we got 9/11. It's never stopped, right? So this is always with us. In the world, you have tribulation. That's the nature of it. It's a very finite place. It's full of all kinds of difficulties. But be not afraid, said Jesus, right? I have overcome the world. And it's not Jesus that overcame the world. It's the Christ presence that overcomes the world, because it sees it from a higher perspective. And if we get too embroiled in all the craziness, we forget the truth, you know, that there is an indwelling peace and stillness and harmony within us, and actually within the world. These things are aberrations. They seem to take center space, but they are aberrations. Most people live honest and lives of integrity, I believe. And, you know, the news is the news because it is unusual, right? So God help us when we start, you know, announcing all the good things that happened, and that's the news, because that means that the rest of it is all crazy. So, you know, I think we got somebody mentioned earlier about Sandra, was it about turning off the TV or whatever, the media, not focusing on it so exclusively. We are in a world now where we hear everything the minute it happened. I was writing yesterday, looked on my phones, and I heard about someone Rushdie and somebody stabbing him, and that was about 3 minutes after it happened. You know, so we hear these things instantaneously, and it fills our mind. And but you know, I'm not saying don't look at social media. I do. I continue to look at it. I want to be informed, but I don't spend all my time focused on it. I go back to spirit because I know that that's the most effective thing I can do.
Beautiful.
I don't know if that answers the question at all, but.
So go ahead, James has a question. Thanks for raising your hand.
Thank you. Reverend Paul Roach, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
You bet.
So this is a really passionate question for me, because I think about so many things. I mean, when you think about peace within and peace without, there are people that really cultivate that peace, like the Dalai Lama. Here he is. I cultivated that peace. I've got a sense of how everything goes together. I understand my lineage and everything. And then he was invaded, Native Americans by imperialistic governments and everything like that. So you can have that peace within yourself, but you're still in the world. You know, you say you're in the world, but not of the world. So we're still in the world, and we're part of this human drama. You've got 8 billion people making choices every single day. And how do they come into accord with this Christ consciousness? And I look at, what do you think about there being like a divine plan on earth, like in Our Father prayer, that there really is a divine plan that's unfolding? Even when you see Russia and Ukraine right now, that's a part of like a 2,000 year long period of history that's still unraveling that conflict and coming to some kind of resolution. And when you look at it, we can look at it with our mind, but not really see the truth of what's actually going on from the longitudinal perspective. So what do you think about there being a divine plan on earth, that there really is an unfoldment? We're going to come into this Christ consciousness together.
Well, I think we've all had inklings in our lives. We have some kind of order and harmony. I know I have, where I've had inklings. Something has happened to me, or I've had a premonition that was going to happen, and then it happened. Something unfolded in a way that told me that maybe this is all preordained in some way. I don't think it's necessarily perfectly preordained. I think we have the gift of free will as well. But I think there is an underlying harmony of unfolding on this planet. You know, Teilhard de Chardin talked a lot about this in his books, and talked about reaching the omega point, you know, where we become Christed beings and everything, and that everything is rising up into that point of awareness. And I think that's probably true. You know, once enough people, I don't think all 8 billion people have to come to this determination. I think there's such a thing as a critical mass. When enough people hold the high watch, come up into a higher level of understanding, then there's a transformation. Then we don't do things the same way. And that's why it's crucially important for movements like Unity and for us individually to hold that high watch, because we are part of that critical mass that are bringing things up. And it sort of addresses what the previous question was about, you know, which is that if we don't do this, we're letting all the crazy people with their crazy views and their graft and corruption, you know, I love that phrase, their particular kind of graft, you know, to hold sway. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case right now. There's too many people with lower level consciousness, unfortunately, ruling our planet. And so it would be great to see that change. I think movements like Unity, I think even the United Nations, however fragmented and difficult that is, I think these are all steps in the right direction towards this higher understanding. You know, we can't rush it. It's beyond our particular ability to force things, but I think it does exist. Now, at a deep level, at a more spiritual level, more profoundly spiritual level, all is well and always has been. Because, you know, as the Hindus say, this is all the play of life. It's Leela, it's Maya, and it doesn't truly exist in an absolute sense. The universe is always been and always will be in divine order and harmony. In fact, nothing exists. That's a profound statement, I know, but you know, at that deepest level, there's simply beingness, and when we enter that level, then we become free. So, but we don't become free so we can avoid all the difficulty. We become free so we can go back and make a difference. But you're right, people who have broken free, you know, don't always get off scot-free, right? They are often like Jesus, crucified, or like people we know in the modern world who have been who had to suffer as a result of their courage in breaking the mold, right? Of being here to stand up and be counted. It's not popular, folks, when you do this stuff, because you know, you're stepping out of the ordinary, and a lot of people are going to resent that. They don't like that. So you know, Salman Rushdie is an example, I guess. You know, he's an example of free speech, and there's some people out there that don't want that's free speech, right? And he was harmed greatly. So our prayers go to him right now, and all the other people that are impacted by their courage, you know, that have stepped out. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Very good question. Yes, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I've alerted the person who sent this to me, and if they would like to read, they're welcome to.
Oh, yeah, right. That was a good one.
Yes, I love this one. All right, I'm going to bounce around here for just a moment to find it. There we go. So not much was discussed about the role of psychedelic plants that had in the development and practice of religions. Mystical experiences reported in shamanic practices and by thousands of individuals parallel many of those reported by mystics of old, saints, near-death experiencers, and others. Harvard Divinity School has now a program on psychedelic chaplaincy for counseling, and medical research in psychedelics is exploding, presently led by Johns Hopkins University. To your knowledge, what part has psychedelics had in historical religious practice? What are your thoughts on the place psychedelics might play within the unity movement?
That's a great question, isn't it? I love it. And I can just imagine all us unity people tripping out right now. That's cool. I don't know what would happen. I would give some LSD to our leadership and see what happens from there. It might transform everything. Who was it that posed that question? Are they with us today?
They are with us today, but they've not revealed himself yet, so I'm not going to point them out.
Oh, they're on here somewhere, but I can't see them. Okay, well, that's fine.
Okay, he's
there.
He's coming clean.
Hi, David. Yeah, great question. Well, there are a lot of religions. I didn't go into great detail in my book about it because it is a huge subject. But two groups come to mind, right? The first peoples of the Americas used psychedelics quite a bit, and the peyote ceremonies and other things, and that's been a long tradition for them. And then I think about the Naga Babas and the Agora Babas in India, that use cannabis extensively. So that there has been, and there's many other cultures that have used various plants and psychedelics. And I think Andrew Whale is involved with this. He's written a book on this, on psychedelics in religions and in culture, which is quite fascinating. I'm a child of the 60s. I went to India, etc. So I did my fair share of experimentation back in the day, and and a lot of people did. Ram Dass is a grand example of that. I think psychedelics can open your mind. They can open a door, as they say, but once the door's opened, you don't necessarily need the psychedelics anymore, because they open your mind to a new understanding. If you get lost in, endlessly imbibing these things, then maybe you're stuck at the doorway instead of going through. There's a famous, talking about Ram Dass, there's a famous moment where Ram Dass, who was experimenting with LSD at the time, was in the presence of his guru, Neem Karoli Baba, and Neem Karoli Baba said, "What is that medicine you've got there? Let me try it." And he took 4 tabs of acid and then smiled at Ram Dass, and supposedly nothing happened, And he said, Neem Karoli Baba, Ram Dass thought, "Oh my God, I've killed my guru. He's gonna flip out and die," but nothing happened, and then Neem Karoli Baba said, when you're free, when you realize, nothing's going to affect you, you're already there. You don't, no kind of drug is going to do it for you. I don't know if I want to put that to the test to see how spiritual I am, just drop some acid. But the point is, he was saying that, there's something beyond psychotropics or psychedelics or any other kind of drug that is, it's not necessary, let's put it like that. However, it does open doors, and it has a long history, and now a lot of people are going to South America and going into ayahuasca ceremonies, right? And now ayahuasca is available in the States too. I'm not sure what goes on in Hawaii. Maybe you can tell me if there's an active culture there, but I'm not against it. I think you need to be careful. A lot of people have really screwed themselves up doing this. I was just on the phone, on a text with a friend of mine who was put up some Pete Green music, and he was in the early Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green, and he went to Germany one time, and somebody gave him too much acid, and it ruined his career. He couldn't play anymore, and he lived for many more years, but it totally destroyed his ability to continue in that band. So it's a sad case, because he was a brilliant guitarist. So yeah, you got to be careful. But yes, it does have a long history, and you may have more insights than I do, David.
I'm very impressed by the medical research that's coming out right now, primarily from John
Mhm.
Hopkins, but other places too.
Right.
Working primarily with psilocybin, with alcoholics and
Oh, yeah.
people with all sorts of addictions, and fear of death, helping people make their transition, things like that.
Yes.
And the fact that there is at least one chaplaincy program using psychedelics now for ministers. And I think that has great potential. In fact, I'm waiting for Unity to have a chaplain that
Awesome.
offers these services. Because the setting and what you bring to it in terms of your goals makes all the difference in terms of what experience you have. And people really, to use it safely and properly, need a guide.
Yes.
To be, it should be a shared experience.
So David, as a
Yeah.
matter of encouragement, I would offer to you that if you become a licensed Unity minister or a licensed Unity teacher, there is the option always of starting an alternative ministry. So if this is something that you would like to have as an alternative ministry, I would encourage you to pursue that.
I'd like to take, I'd like to try it out, but not be a minister.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, you
we're
know,
gonna have to
in
spread the
my-
word around this. Oh, go ahead, please, Paul
I say
John.
in my ministerial career, I've known many people who have, were in terminal cancer situations that have used marijuana, and in one case psilocybin, with good effect. Because it allayed their anxiety. It gave them a sense of peace at the end there. So I can attest to that. So, but it needs to be in a safe environment, as you said, with a guide, and I think it can be helpful because I've seen the effectiveness of it.
It's pretty amazing stuff, definitely.
Thank you.
David, would you like to ask your second question?
Your book does a wonderful job of showing that unity principles and unity with God, Spirit, appears in all major religions. Most religions seem resistant to the rapid social and political changes happening in our age and our revelations of God through science. How do you see unity movement stepping up to meet this vacuum of spiritual leadership? Should unity promote perennial philosophy as a basis for ecumenical movement?
Well, I'm glad they published my book. That's a good start. Because we needed a book in Unity about the connection between Unity and other religions and the essential perennial philosophy, right? It was kind of missing. So we plugged a gap there, I think, with this book, and I hope it's going to be effective for people. But in the larger picture, yeah, I think it's true that, and it's one of the things I mentioned in the last chapter of my book, The Future of Religions. I look at some of the challenges that are facing our planet in terms of religions in general and human beings in general. But it's and I mentioned it also in the book that we cannot be stuck in an era of 600 BC where all the great scriptures were written and have them as our last word on the subject, right? And however much we admired the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of the Buddha and others out to, we're all written around the same time. We're moving on. I think this is the problem with anything that becomes a cast iron document. Even our Declaration of Independence, we have to stumble around trying to interpret it because it was written by people in 1776 and we're in 2022. We've moved on. Not that we don't honor it as a wonderful document, but I hate to see that that's the be all and end all. And so we have to move with the times. And I'm looking forward to the next great scriptures that come forth, that unfolds from our new understanding. I'm excited about science and its connection to spirituality. I think that's the cutting edge, actually, of some of the things that are going on the planet. I think that the Large Hadron Collider, for instance, at CERN in Switzerland, looking at subatomic particles is one of the most exciting things that's happening for humanity, because we're looking deep into the nature of the universe and how it unfolded and what its nature is. That doesn't get a huge lot of publicity, but it's quite fascinating. I think the same with the new the James Webb telescope, right? We're seeing things from that too. These are all expanding our view, a world view, a universal view of what's going on, and that can be unfolded into our spiritual understanding too. So yeah, I think there are many things that can be done in unity actually that we don't do for some reason. So I absolutely love it that there's these questions are coming out, because the level of questions from this group, your group, is phenomenal, because not everybody's asking these questions. So you're obviously doing something right over there in Hawaii, and I applaud it. But I invite you to make your questions known to the leadership, because that's where things change, right? You certainly to your own minister, but don't be afraid to contact the headquarters. Jim Blake, the CEO of Unity World Headquarters, is very receptive, and Shad Groveland at Unity Worldwide Ministries, I know is also open. So both of those people would welcome your statements and your ideas. So don't be afraid to send them to them. I think that's crucially important.
Thank you. So I've been sent something in the chat privately. So I think that this person would rather not ask the question themselves. So I'm going to take that up. In the event that shifts, I'll encourage them and invite them to speak up, because I'm not entirely certain I understand this question, but I'm just going to read it as it states here. Perhaps you can make something of this. I would like to hear more about the perspective Unity has regarding what we often refer to as heaven. I love considering the next level of learning the afterlife offers, but I struggle with the vision.
Gio, that was from me. And
yes.
I have a great imagination, and I have a traditional background, and I've had some people that are ahead of me in this transition. And I just I not fight with the vision, but I'm kind of curious about the physical. I don't know what I'm beyond the clouds and the angels, but I don't know what to replace that with. And I see, if you can just kind of share a little more.
It's a big subject, but it's a great one. Traditionally in Unity, we emphasize that the kingdom of heaven is not something after you die. It's something that's within you, right? Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within you and among you. It's a consciousness, it's an awareness of that completeness and wholeness and expansiveness. In fact, that's what heaven means, I think, in the Greek. It's the kingdom of expansiveness. So when we're expansive, magnanimous, loving, giving, unconditional, we're in heaven. So it's a present day, present moment thing. But we don't always get there, do we? We're not always in that heavenly state. We're filled with all the troubles and difficulties. But Jesus was encouraging us, I think, to enter into, be as expansive as you can at any given time. We've got two choices: mean or expansive. And sometimes we just end up mean. And it's exciting then to shift that and say, I don't have to be mean. I don't have to be limited. I don't have to be worried and fretful. I can be expansive. I can be giving and loving. And that's the heavenly state. We also teach in Unity, that depending on where you are in consciousness while you're alive, that's probably what's going to happen after you die, because you just move to another dimensional reality. And so if you're holding, negative thoughts all the time, you're not going to hell, but you're in a difficult, conflicted state after you die. And I think that's what ghosts are sometimes, is, elements of people that couldn't escape from that particular condition, and they haunt that house or that situation until they're freed. But if we do the work, and Jesus again said, let the dead bury the dead. I'm about the living. take care of what's happening now and to the highest, and you know whatever happens later is going to be okay. Another aspect of this is you were never born and you'll never die. You know, the reality of you is spirit. That was never born. So only the conditioned part of you, the expression, the physical, the mind body, if you like, only that is subject to sickness, old age, and death. The reality of you is spirit, and so you know the continuity of spirit is assured. So everything's going to be okay, no matter what. Though you know, none of us know, do we? None of us have experienced it quite yet. If you had a near-death experience, you may have got close to it, but a lot of people who have near-death experiences teach that it's a safe place, right? There's often that tunnel of light. There's that sense of being welcomed home by a loved one or by an angel. It seems like, you know, this universe is a benevolent universe. All is well. We don't have to worry about it. But I think it's crucially important to live well now, you know, and then don't worry about what's going to happen later.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking the question, Carla. I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
If anyone would like to send something to me in the chat, you're welcome to do that. I didn't think about even offering that up. And oh, good. Tim has a question. We'll go ahead and address that before we go into the next one.
Good morning, and thanks for morning here. You know, thanks for coming. I got 3 questions. I'll shoot them off real quick. First one is, can you come every Saturday? And the second one is, well, the second one, you said, you know, you appeal to what I like to call my sense of justice when you said, I hope that the criminals end up going to jail. But then when I think about how sort of distorted by my ego that my sense of justice is, I start thinking about like how our penitentiary system is so cruel and borders on revenge. And I wouldn't really wish that on anybody, but on the other hand, I want some sense of justice in the world too.
Right.
What do you think about prison reform and what a real sense of justice might actually look like?
Well, again, you know, the criminal system is big business, and like a lot of things in America and around the world, we're not alone. It's a self-fulfilling thing, and it's until there's a whole shift in the whole mental attitude shift in what incarceration is all about, it's going to continue as such, I think. And again, there's one rule for one and one rule for another. You know, class and race makes a big difference. If you happen to be in the higher levels of society in terms of class, your incarceration experience is generally a little different to if you're in the working class or lower classes, underclass, or if you're Black or Hispanic. So, you know, there's the inherent injustice in our world. I like the idea of restorative justice, and there is that movement these days that's coming along, which is, you know, that you're creating more criminals by putting them in prison, right? And there's ways we can help and train people so they don't become recidivists and go back into prison and learn more and more ways to be not in society. So I think there's a huge opportunity to do this work, but unfortunately, I have no clue how it can be achieved, because there's so many powerful forces that want to keep the status quo in place. So I know that's not very helpful and optimistic, but I do believe there's another way, and that's restorative justice. Just as we talked about with drug use, you know, there's ways to use drugs effectively, and I think there's ways to deal with, quote, criminals or people who have made wrong decisions effectively. And I don't think we always do that. We just put them in these ridiculous, you know, incarcerated situations. And I've been around, you know, jails enough, you know, visiting people in my career to know that, no, that's not the highest and best way to go for a lot of people. You know, for some it is, because there's some people who are, you know, dangerous to society, and you know, who you know, need to be protected against. So we can't let certain people free. I don't think, unfortunately.
My last question is there any information you can share from the head of the church's area about when the aliens are arriving?
Yeah, any day now, I think. Well, I actually think they've already infiltrated most of us.
We have several here.
Yes, of course. Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
It might be interesting though too, and we referenced the James Webb telescope earlier. I think there's a lot more going on in the universe than we can imagine, right? And we're looking keenly now for other life in the universe, and why should we be the only ones, right? So I'm sure there's many other life forms out there. They may not be carbon based or whatever, but they may show up in a whole different form. I think most aliens, traveling close to our planet, have a look down, say, not ready yet. So, that's what I don't think we're advanced enough for most of the life. Any life that could approach us is probably more advanced than we are. But again, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about all those things, but then I do see things like crop circles and other phenomena. And you think, wow, where's that? What's happening? There's more going on than meets the eye. Let's put it like that.
So thank you for that. I do want to note that you did not address the very first question. Can you come every Saturday?
Probably, unfortunately not. No, I've got a busy schedule, but
okay.
I'd love to come whenever I can. But you don't want to listen to me all the time either.
I noticed how I responded to that question. My first thought was, wow, that would be so cool. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that means I wouldn't get to facilitate every Saturday. Oh no.
Yeah, and I am officially retired.
Okay.
Yeah, but when I wrote the book, it's got busier and busier. So yeah.
So our last
the human
set of questions.
hat. Yeah.
Yes. So Paul John, you want to just jump in and answer the question? Everyone can see it. Or,
about Herman Hesse, right?
Yes.
Or Herman Hesse. Yeah, I love Herman Hesse. I read him when I was younger, and love his work. Of course, his most famous spiritual book is Siddhartha, right? And loosely follows the life of the Buddha, and just a very poetic book. I recommend everybody who has not read that book to read it, simply because it's so beautifully presented and poetically presented. And there's some wonderful moments. He ends up with a courtesan at one point and learns about love from her, and then he goes down to the river and learns from the ferryman, and then he learns from his own inner soul. Everything comes together for him to understand the truth of his being. Just a lovely book. And of course, the books by Herman Hesse, Steppenwolf was a great one. Yeah. And there's another one called The Glass Bead Game, which you're familiar with that. Yeah, that's quite spiritual too. So he was definitely into what we might call new agey things back in the day, right? Because this is back in the 20s and 30s, writing these books, and pretty interesting guy. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoy him.
Thank you.
The other one was about Adyashanti. Yeah. So you've been following him for a while. Cool.
5 years. Have you heard of him?
Yeah. I love Adyashanti. He was a Zen student for many years, and then decided that was a dead end for him, and had a spontaneous awakening, and been teaching ever since. Yeah. And he was a bicycle repairman as a trade, which I always found interesting. There's many teachers and gurus that had very humble work that they did. Sri Siddhartha Maharaj, for instance, one of the greats of the mid-20th century, sold cigarettes in Bombay. And Adyashanti was a bicycle repairman. And there's been others that have done just simple things, but were, vast in their understanding. So one of Adyashanti's books is called Emptiness Dancing. And that is one of my favorite books, not just because the what's in the book, but because of the title, because I think the title sums up everything about the truth. Each one of us is emptiness dancing, right? Because the essence of us is that empty, spacious boundlessness of spirit. There's no time or space to spirit. We're empty, we're open. And yet we're dancing. We're in manifest form, and this is the dance of life. So to marry those two together, we are emptiness dancing, is a very beautiful thing, and it speaks to the fact we're more than our humanness, and yet we are our humanness at the same time. So we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and I just love that idea. Emptiness. Here I am. I'm emptiness dancing right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And if you're in Texas, I'm going to be hosting a retreat with him, hopefully next year in Austin.
Oh, that'd be
I'll
awesome.
invite you.
Yeah, that'd be
I'll send you
awesome.
an
I'd love to.
invite.
Thank you. I'd love to go. I've never met him personally, so
Yeah.
love to be at that.
Yeah, I met him in New Mexico 3 years ago. Yeah, I went to his retreat.
Great
Yeah.
guy.
Thank you.
Lovely soul, very compassionate person,
Yeah.
very real, very natural, no BS, just just the truth, in a very nice way. And he has the ability to wake people up too.
He does.
Yeah, he has that ability to really be present, and that's always a gift.
So
Thanks.
hold on, in reference to Ed's question, there was the mention of the vast, rapid manner in which we went through the saints. And it was such a beautiful thing when I read that, and to see all of the overview of so many of the saints. That was, I love that element of the book, and that's something great. So I've gotten another question in the chat, and I'm going to let them reveal themselves if they would like to, but I'll read it as it states. It says, the medical and pharmaceutical industries are also very big business. What are your thoughts about them, especially in regard to prayer or healing, or prayer for healing?
Well, my wife just bought a T-shirt at the convention this June, and it's got it says heavily meditated. Heavenly meditated, rather than heavily medicated. And I like that because that's the alternative, right? To being lost in the world of big pharma. I think it has its place, as any medicine that can help us. I think miracles have happened because of certain medicines. We are able to eradicate things that we were never able to before. I think, dealing with COVID, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think that COVID, we've helped everybody by going through the vaccination process. So I think it has its role. I also think it's out of control, and we have, unfortunately, addiction that's widespread now to certain prescribed drugs, right? We're all familiar with that. And, we are an addicted society, folks. I mean, I think more drugs are consumed by Americans than any other people on this planet, right? And as long as that's the case, as long as we crave that, and why do we crave it? Because we feel not the emptiness of spirit, but we feel the emptiness of our souls, our human souls, yearning for meaning. And as long as there's that sense of things aren't right, we're gonna try and fill it with external helps, whether it be alcohol, medications, drugs, whatever, addictions of one kind or another, sex addictions, you name it. There's a multiplicity of these things that can help hopefully distract us, and they never do. The temporary fixes. So if we begin to center ourselves once again in the truth of ourselves, then we're not going to need half of the stuff that we think we need right now. So cruise ships. I don't want to knock cruise ships if anybody loves cruising, but those are part of the problem. I think they're huge polluters of the oceans, and everybody loves them, right? Go on a cruise ship tour or whatever. But
So-
that's my particular, that's my human ego speaking there rather than spirit.
I have
Leave
one
that
more
one alone.
question from the chat. How have your spiritual beliefs changed as a result of you writing this book? Did you shed any
Changed.
spiritual beliefs?
Oh no, I know
Or
everything,
expanding new ones?
and I haven't changed at all since like 40 years ago. I don't think they changed as a result of writing the book. They change every day as I hopefully unfold in understanding. You know, it was helpful, of course, to read the all the various studies that I did to prepare for writing the book, and that was very insightful. But really, the practice here is a daily one, right? And so there's been things that I've known since I was a child that have stayed with me because I think we have an inherent knowledge. But that knowledge is always unfolding, and I hope to be a wiser, more loving person every single day. As I unfold, and that's my wish for all of us. That each and every day we have a greater understanding of what's going on, and therefore a greater ability to love and express that as kindness and compassion in our lives. So yeah, it's an unfolding process.
So we have a question from Leslie. Please go ahead, Leslie.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here today.
Sure.
I'm in seminary with UWSI, and
Cool.
it amazes me that our class constantly gets into a discussion over whether or not unity is a Christian movement or shouldn't be considered Christian at all. And the current seminary class I'm in is about 50% divided on each side of that.
Huh.
I know, it's amazing to me. Hello. But could you speak to where you see unity falling on this debate as a final answer as time goes on?
Yeah, good question. I don't think there'll ever be a final answer. It goes back to what I said earlier. Once we decide that it's one way or the other, then we're dead. So I think the dialogue between is it or isn't it is good. Because that means we're thinking and exploring what Christianity is really about. I think for many traditional Christians, they look at unity and they would say we're not Christian, right? I think we're in the book of world cults and somewhere in that book. I think they're cults, not us, personally. But that's another subject. But I don't want to generalize. But in some ways, the people who condemn others are more judgmental than the people they condemn. So, but I think in the larger sense, are we following the teachings of the Christ? There's a big difference between the teachings of Jesus and the teachings about Jesus. The teachings about Jesus turned into Christianity. The teachings of Jesus are the perennial philosophy that is in all religions. So in a sense, we're not Christian in that limited sense. We don't follow the teachings about Jesus and all the things that they made up about him, but we do follow, hopefully, the teachings of Jesus, which is a radically transformative teaching that'll totally change your life. And Jesus is the man. He was a great master, and we absolutely follow him. But whether we are Christians as such, he didn't call himself a Christian, and the early Christians didn't call themselves Christians either. They call themselves followers of the way, and I like that. I think unity is following the way of truth, the way of life, the way of love. So, but having said that, we are based, aren't we, in the Bible, in the metaphysics of the Gospels, and the teachings of Jesus. So in a sense, we are first and foremost a Christian movement, but we welcome all movements because we're part of that perennial philosophy I talk about in the book.
The golden threads that run through them all. I love that.
That's it, the golden thread.
I have another question that was presented. So Paul John, you mentioned from the very start that you're in Taos to actually write the book that you'd wanted to write in the first place. And
yeah,
you also went through the process of writing Unity and World Religions. Someone's asking about writing as a form of spiritual self-discovery, and they wanted to know about how that has the potential to change you or to change anyone.
Now, that's a huge question, and it's a wonderful question. Could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But yes, there is power in writing. You know, once you commit to putting something down, it's very different from what you think you know in your head. Because when you articulate something in writing, then you really have to know what you're talking about to put it down there. And so that can be very salutary in terms of focusing what you really believe. I think that's why keeping a journal or as some such, not just writing a book, but any writing you do is helpful in that regard, because it helps you to focus what you really think about a subject. Also, in the process of writing, the mind that you can't control, you know, that larger mind, the spiritual source of what's going on, will inform your writing, and you'll write things you never thought of in the notes that you might have had beforehand. And that's the magic. I think that's the brilliance of writing, is it helps the spirit express. Some people call it automatic writing, right? Where you just don't think at all, and you just see what comes out. And I think you have to allow for that in any writing, allow for the unexpected. And I love that. When I'm writing, I love those moments when I start writing stuff and I thought, where did that come from? It came from my larger mind, right? And that's some of the best bits in the book sometimes, is that's that element. So yeah, I think writing can be very powerful simply because you're articulating it through the written word, and then you're opening to that larger understanding, that intuitive awareness that comes through in writing. Third thing is sometimes you can get blocks in writing, right? I just can't write anything. And I think that's, again, because the humanness or the ego gets in the way. You're trying to be profound. You know, how can I write a beautiful thing that's going to influence people or whatever? That's the fatal thing to do. Never write because you think it's going to be wonderful for somebody else. Write because this is the truth for you, but write for another person in the sense of a conversation. Have a conversation in the writing, because then I think it flows. But as long as you think you're writing the grand, piece of wisdom, then that's fatal. It becomes heavy and dull and annoying.
I've never done that.
Believe me, I've tried it. I started one book and I wrote the first 3 pages. I thought, what is this rot? This is terrible. And I had to rip it all up because it was, it was not real. And I try and bring a light touch. You mentioned earlier, joy, laughter, and gratitude are key elements for me. I think keep a light touch to everything, and that includes the writing. Don't get too heavy about it. Have fun with it. Have fun with life, right? Keep the light touch.
So we have about 5 minutes more. Sue, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your writing process. Do you meditate or pray before you write? Do you write in the morning? I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind talking about it.
Yeah, no, fine. I don't specifically meditate before I write, because I'm trying to be in a meditative, prayerful state, anyway. I like to chant. I chant a lot of Sanskrit chants, and so I'll be doing that sometimes. But I found that the morning is a good time because you're fresh. The world's fresh again after the night. You haven't been thinking too much. You've had some dreams that have cleansed your mind. You're open to new possibility, and often things flow in the morning. So I tend to write in the morning. I write a little bit, maybe a few, if I can get it done, 1,000 or a couple of thousand words, and then I'll stop because I think that I'm going to run out of steam. If you allow yourself to write more, sometimes it's too much of your humanness getting in there. I think the first stuff that comes out is the best stuff. So, but if I'm really on a roll, I'll just keep going as long as I need to, right? And then stop. But it seems I'm guided to stop, before I go too far into it. And then you can go back and edit later. But that's my general pattern, I think. I think my daughter sent me something about a writer who said that she writes in the morning because it's before her doubting mind takes over. And I thought that was interesting. When you're doubting mind, I can't do this. once that takes over, then, it's not going to happen anymore.
Love that. Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Yeah. So you're a writer, good. Like to know your
I
process.
believe that we are, we might have a moment for one more brief question, if anyone has one. I do want to say thank you very, very much for being willing to come
Thank
along with
you.
us and to.
Well, thank
yes,
you all. What
let's give them a
wonderful
hand.
questions, wonderful consciousness, and what a joy to be here, truly. So thank you. And thank you, Reverend Towner, for the invitation.
Mahalo.
My pleasure, my privilege. So next week we will begin again, starting in the book